Ladies and gentlemen, good evening to all of you. In international news, Colombia has just dealt a very heavy blow to Israel's economy. The Colombian president is very upset with Israel. He is so extremely upset that he has just made a decision that Israel did not expect at all. I mean, all conscious people, everyone who still knows compassion, everyone with a bit of humanism, who knows what is happening in the Gaza Strip, all these countries are rising up against Israel. Yes, it surprises the world, Colombia rising up like this. But the decision in question concerns electricity, energy itself in Israel. Ladies and gentlemen, in the context of this video conference, of course, this is the current event we are going to talk about. But before we continue, I humbly ask you to share this video conference as much as possible. Share it in every group you can. Give it lots of likes. And don't forget to leave a comment with your thoughts. Let's dive deeper. This is a heavy blow for Israel. It was the current Colombian president, Gustavo Petro, who officially announced that the nation of Colombia would definitively cease supplying coal to Israel, a significant decision with considerable implications. That is the decision. But the reasoning behind this decision will surprise you. Coal, and they are going to stop giving coal to Israel. So, when we talk about coal, what does that remind us of? Obviously, it is undoubtedly one of the primary sources, if not the absolute main source of energy within the nation of Israel, serving as its principal and most significant energy supply. And so, stopping the supply to Israel is complicated for Israel because Colombia is Israel's main coal supplier. The Colombian president, Gustavo Petro, announced that Colombia will stop supplying coal to Israel, stating categorically said this: not a single ton of coal will go to Israel. That's an order. In other words, he speaks with a certain intensity. Not a single ton of coal will go to Israel. And then he says, that's an order. We'll see in a moment how important coal is for Israel. He justified this measure by the accusation he makes against Israel. He says, Colombia will not be complicit in a genocide. What is happening in the Gaza Strip and elsewhere. So he says, no, it's impossible. He asserts that Colombia will not be complicit in such acts of genocide. And so this is the decision he had to make. By the end of this video conference, you will understand that real pressure is being put on Israel. How important is coal for Israel? It should be noted that Israel has fought to reduce its energy dependence on coal. However, Israel is still dependent on coal for its energy. Over the past decade, thanks to the development of these natural gas fields, coal has continued to play a role in its energy mix. In 2022, coal still accounted for about 19 to 20% of electricity production. 19 to 20% of electricity production in 2022. That figure is not a small number. It's a huge number. 19 to 20%. So if 19 to 20% of electricity comes from coal, and Colombia has been the main supplier for centuries, for years, that means Israel has just suffered an extremely heavy blow. We learned that Israel aimed to completely eliminate coal from its energy mix by 2025. But reality always catches up with Israel. Yes, reality always catches up with Israel. It must be said, it obviously needs to be reiterated. Because supply realities and energy needs keep its use going. Where is Israel going to resupply? What other source will Israel use to replace coal? There you have it. And so Israel remains at the same level. They haven't been able to get rid of coal. Colombia, which was or is the main supplier of coal to Israel, makes this decision particularly problematic for the country's supply and the stability of the electrical grid. So before long, the Israeli power grid will face serious difficulties. Very serious difficulties. Obviously, it will disrupt everything. So Israel has a choice to stop all this mess it's causing in Gaza and elsewhere. Or else, Gustavo Petro's decision he will stick to it is Colombians. As you know, when we talk about Colombians, we know what that means. There you go. These are people that are wise in their heads. So, what are the economic and geopolitical implications? It must be said that this suspension of deliveries will have a major impact on Israel's energy economy because Israel will have to diversify its supply sources. But how will Israel do that? Diversify its supply sources. Yes, if by chance Israel manages to find other sources to supply itself, that's good. That's a positive thing. But the cost will be high. Because as soon as that happens, the cost is high. That's one thing. Secondly, it will require major logistics. How will everything be transported and all that? But with Colombia, everything was going perfectly well. All Israel had to do was pay. The supply lines were there. Everything moved freely. But this time, they'll have to figure out new transit routes. First of all, for now, the issue is where to source from. What is the quality? Does it meet Israel's needs? And where to route it through, and so on and so forth. These are just some of the challenges Israel is now facing. So Israel has a choice. Either stop what it is doing in Gaza and elsewhere, or continue and permanently sever ties with Colombia. What remains clear is that even if they manage to resume trade since, Colombia also benefits from it even if they were to resume. It is already a diplomatic punishment. It is already a very strong message sent to the whole world to prove that what Israel is doing, Colombia wants to show that what Israel is doing is not a good thing, and Colombia does not support it. That's why Colombia is also using another form of sanction. And so, ladies and gentlemen, that was the top story in international news. Thank you for sharing it as much as possible. I'll be back with more news shortly. This was the voice of your one and only samurai.